Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Kyle Moran. He's a political commentator and Young Voices contributor. Kyle, you've recently written about tensions between the US and Venezuela. Can you tell us what is happening?
Yes, so it's definitely been quite a bit of escalation over the past weeks and even the last few days. There was a strike by the U.S. Armed Forces on Venezuelan drug boat that they were alleging carried drugs headed for the United States. There was a second strike yesterday. We're recording this on September 16th. As of yesterday, they struck another boat under similar context. And the U.S. military has been moving steadily more and more forces to the region, which really has upped both the pressure on Maduro as well as the potential of armed conflict.
You've actually called it maximum pressure and minimum coherence. What does that even mean?
Yes. So, in regards to the minimum coherence, this is in reference to the fact that we are continuing to allow Chevron to drill oil on Venezuelan soil. So, in the broader scheme of things, I wouldn't say it's minimum coherence, but when you're looking at this through the lens of the Chevron drilling, it really starts to not make a whole lot of sense. The theory being, when they announced this, uh, this is supposed to be the money from the oil coming out of Venezuela is essentially supposed to go into an offshore lockbox that the Venezuelan government cannot specifically touch. But we know that this is not how it's going to happen. Venezuela's government, their state-run entity PDVSA, owns a share of every operation that goes on there, and they have a lot of control over exports, as well as like they can just shut down anything Chevron tries to ship out of the country if they're not paying export taxes and whatnot. So they have a lot of say over this, and they've already been moving this year, 2025, to be into conflict with Chevron by blocking some of the exports, specifically for this the export fees that they're trying to extract from the company. So this is not going to sit in some offshore lockbox. It's going to definitely help the Maduro government, as well as Chevron because they can't pay in dollars because of sanctions. What they are doing is drilling and then sending some of what they're drilling to the government there as a way of paying them, which was an idea from Maduro himself. So they're essentially getting free oil from Chevron by way of this, which at a point in time where we're increasingly on a war footing with Caracas, I mean, this just simply does not make sense.
Let's talk about the military buildup. We've got F 35 jets in Puerto Rico, and we've got US Navy warships patrolling near the waters of Venezuela. We've had two strikes on two separate Venezuelan boats. Both times it was said that they were linked to drug cartels. Maduro has, of course, said that it was an attack on Venezuelan civilians. And, of course, he has the right to say that. And, of course, the Trump administration also has the right to say that it was boats linked to drug cartels. But let's look at the bigger picture. Are we looking at a collision course? Do you think there could be an actual war?
In terms of all-out boots-on-the-ground Iraq-style invasion, I'm going to go with no. But there is a lot of distance to travel from where we are today to that point where you're setting up governments in Caracas. And I definitely think that there are a lot of military options on the table in that gray area between the two. Maduro himself has had a terrible track record on this, where he has been quite involved with trafficking narcotics through the area and up into the United States, absolutely flooding the country with a lot of the drugs that the country's struggling so badly with, and has been for quite some time. For example, the Carteles de las Solas has been linked to the Maduro government, as has Tren de Aragua. They are all working in tandem together. And Secretary Rubio has been very vocal in calling this out, and I absolutely think he's warranted in doing so. The Venezuelan opposition, for their part, has been largely in tandem with the United States in terms of condemning Maduro for his narco terrorism ties. And I think that as this continues to escalate, this is something that has become something of a lifeline for the Maduro regime because of how cash starved they are. So I think in terms of moving forward, there could definitely be military escalation in the region.
Do you think Venezuela has the means to respond to the US? I mean, clearly there's a mismatch of the balance of power. What do you think would be looking at? Is he strategizing to maybe cause some damage, or is he totally looking to just stay away from any kind of conflict?
I mean, to some extent, they can respond. It's going to be very disjointed. He has mobilized his domestic volunteer militia, which he claims has upwards of 8 million members. There have been a lot of intelligence reports, both open source, especially open source, that are saying that this is not really happening too much. It's going to be somewhat of a show, kind of a show force in terms of what he's saying. He does want to present himself as strong. He wants to present his nation as strong and standing up to what he's posing as American imperialism. So he has a lot riding on the ability to at least appear as though he can respond strongly. When it comes to actually if shots are being fired, again, I really don't think we're going to enter a situation like an Iraq-style invasion. So this could be much more clandestine or like individual operation strategy approaches. And on that front, they're going to struggle way more. I mean, the United States can really operate in stealth for a lot of targeted operations. And I don't see how Maduro is able to really counter that in any meaningful way.
Right now, what we have seen is that Maduro has launched an AI campaign. It's called Yo Me Alisto. It is his way of basically mobilizing his base, his supporters, a lot of whom who are armed gunmen. But do you think ordinary Venezuelans want to even stand up for Maduro, given how contested the elections were and how still a lot of people, actually a majority of people in Venezuela, say that Maduro stole the election and that he was not the rightful winner last year? Do you think there is mass support for Maduro in case Washington and Caracas come to blows?
There's always going to be some, and it's inherently part of Maduro's survival strategy that he portray the nation as this unified entity, all rallying around him. I think that the reality on the ground is much, much different, especially given the 2024 election. But this has been an ongoing phenomena where Venezuela used to be the richest country in South America, and it used to be richer in terms of GDP per capita than many European countries as late as the 50s and even into the 60s, richer than Portugal, for instance. This has been a long-term collapse of a country that has gotten significantly worse over the last few years. And I mean, my heart breaks for those who are going through this on a day-to-day basis, where food has become incredibly scarce. The hyperinflation is just impossible to imagine. And so on this level, the support that the legitimacy that the regime has lost here is hard to overstate in the minds of many Venezuelans who may not necessarily even be the most pro-United States supporters in general, or at least long term, but now are moving significantly away from the Maduro regime.
Let's look at Venezuela. I mean, they have the largest known oil reserves in the world. They've been hit with sanctions. They've not been able to openly sell their oil. I think China, India, and I believe Iran are some of the only customers that they've had in the last half a decade. What is the Trump administration looking at Venezuela? Do they think, okay, we need to get rid of Maduro because he's obviously supporting drug cartels, and he's pushing for drug cartels towards the US to what the Trump administration calls as destabilizing the border region? Or do you think this is more about oil and energy resources? Because if we look at what's happened this year, I mean, hundreds of Venezuelans have been removed from the US. The government says that they are all members of Tren de Aragua. They've been shipped, not shipped, they've been flown into El Salvador and kept in camps, detention camps. But of course, is this just about drug cartels, or do you think it's a lot about oil as well?
Well, the simple answer to that is it's about the drugs. When you look at oil, if the United States was merely interested in extracting oil through the country, I mean, I have to add the fact that we are now on that list alongside China and Iran and Russia in terms of buying Venezuelan oil, which is unfortunate. But when you're trying to get a relationship like that with a government that's very eager to be selling you those resources, you're not at the same time discussing intervention or potentially even war between the two countries. That would not be in the interest of maximizing Venezuelan oil exports at all. So in terms of that, it's about the drugs. The oil thing is again unfortunate, and this is a return to the Biden era of foreign policy, where we had not been buying Venezuelan oil for a very long time, but due to the Biden era energy policies that drove oil and gas up so high, he had to turn to Venezuela and started to allow exports from there. And that was a very bad misstep, in my opinion. But the saving grace of the Trump administration, well, one of his first moves upon taking office was to cancel those oil licenses. So we stopped buying Venezuelan oil, and then he reversed himself, or the Trump administration. I don't know how much say Trump personally had over this. The Trump administration reversed course and then started buying Venezuelan oil again. So this is where it starts to become quite messy. And unfortunately, this is where the maximum pressure campaign really has this big vulnerability in terms of its effectiveness.
I want to stay with the oil, and I want to look just beyond Venezuela. So it's neighbors with Guyana, and it's also neighbors with Brazil. Of course, Brazil is a major power in the region, and Guyana sits on massive oil reserves as well. In fact, Essequibo is a region that stays disputed between Venezuela and Guyana. Maduro has threatened to invade Guyana and basically capture all of Essequibo. Of course, Georgetown has reached out to Washington for support, and they have both signed an agreement that American companies will continue to operate in Guyana and basically secure any oil. How do you think Guyana and Brazil are looking at what's happening between the US and Venezuela? Are they tense? Are they hoping that things work out? Because if there is a conflict, it's going to, of course, create a lot of problems in the region. There's a lot of oil trade that's happening, and it could really affect a global oil market. So what do you think these two countries are thinking?
I do just want to add that this has already caused enormous regional tensions. Millions of Venezuelans have left the country. I believe it's over 10 million Venezuelans have fled over the last decade or so as a result of the collapsing economy. So when we discuss these neighboring countries, I do just want to preface Colombia has been especially hard hit with the large number of Venezuelans leaving the country. So this is something that is already being felt quite hard throughout the region. And it has created a lot of instability. Now, to your point on the Guyana in particular, Essequibo is a very large part of the country. So it's not like not that it would be okay if they were, but it's not like they're just talking about annexing a little sliver of Guyana. This is a major section of the country, and represents an existential threat to the existence of Guyana. So there is not a lot of love lost between them and Caracas right now. So they have been largely very supportive of the U.S. on this. They're watching every move out of Caracas. Thankfully, Maduro seems to have stepped back slightly in terms of his, at some points, openly pro-annexation rhetoric. He even mobilized some forces back in 2023, early 2024, I believe, making it look like invasion was imminent. So the tension there is still quite high, although it has stepped back slightly. But that really does show what type of government is running the show in Caracas. Brazil, for its part, granted, this is partially a result of not being under threat of annexation. President Lula has been far more supportive of Maduro than Guyana has. They are trying to do a delicate balancing act of opposing war without being full sail pro Maduro, even though Lula is pretty far left himself and has in general been supportive of Maduro and his approach to a wide variety of things, but he has not gone the full endorsement route of somebody like Gustavo Petro in Bogota, who has been at least reported to consider declaring war on the United States if we take out Maduro, which is a whole different level of anything we've seen. But in terms of the regional impact, this is something that is being felt now. It has been being felt for some time. That's really shaping how these neighboring countries are seeing it.
Let's go beyond the region. Two major countries have supported Venezuela through the years. First is, of course, Russia. Second is China. In fact, Maduro was recently seen flaunting a Huawei cell phone in one of the conferences, and he said that he trusts the Chinese and that he is happy to use a Huawei phone himself. How do you think Moscow and Beijing are looking at what's happening? Do you think they're going to step in if tensions escalate further between the US and Venezuela? Or do you think China and Russia are just they would much rather stay away from the region and from any potential conflict?
Russia and China are going to have two different approaches to this. Russia, in no small part, because Russia currently has its hands full with another conflict going on, but that's a conversation for another day. For what it's worth, they have expressed support for Maduro, and they are doing small measures. China has been far more influential on this than Russia has been. China, and this is where the Chevron thing comes back into play, because the people who were pushing to allow Chevron to be drilling in Venezuela often point to the fact, okay, well, China is drilling and buying Venezuelan oil. So if we don't do it ourselves, it's simply going to go to China, and that this is terrible. China is not doing this because they need oil. China has a wide variety of markets they can be buying from, and they do not have any great energy shortage of any scale right now. If anything, they've been ramping up their energy production like crazy, and they're investing in all sorts of different energy production methods. Their energy production is quite alarming to me. But the idea that it's Venezuelan oil purchases is somehow this massive influence on their energy market is just a fever dream that people are using to defend Chevron moving in to start drilling there. If we're buying it instead of China, that doesn't matter. China is still going to get their energy, and now Venezuela is still producing record amounts of oil as of late. So this is a record as of the last few years, perhaps not an all-time record given pre-sanction eras, but the overall production has gone up considerably within Venezuela because of this move, which is deeply unfortunate.
Kyle, very quickly, before the year ends, what do you think could happen? maybe you can look into the crystal ball and do some gazing and predict
Oh gosh.
in very shortly. Do you think that things could go south, or do you think maybe Maduro and Trump could find a way to basically lower some of the tensions?
I mean, and I say this again, this is more crystal ball gazing than anything, but I do think that further action is definitely going to be likely against Caracas. I'm going to say it's going to be somewhere between, like not going as far, nearly as far as a full Iraq-style invasion, and it's going to be more aggressive than the recent actions we've seen, where it's one-off boats that are being bombed. I don't think Trump is not a war hawk. He's never been a war hawk, but he's also not an isolationist. He's not somebody who's afraid of using U.S. military force. And I know that some people may disagree with my assessment there, but I have long maintained this position. And you can see this through various engagements where, yes, he wants to withdraw from various international engagements, but then he just bombs the leader, one of the top generals of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. He is not afraid to use military force when he determines it's in the national interest, and this is something he's really starting to push. He's moved a lot of U.S. forces to the region, and he's been talking about specifically Venezuela for some time now, and their leader there. So I don't see a way where this just sort of goes away. Whether or not that's going to escalate into full-scale regime change, I don't think it's going that far, but I think we're definitely going to see some further escalation.
If there is escalation from American side, what do you think Venezuela is going to do? Because I mean, the Pentagon has definitely warned Caracas and said that if there are any Venezuelan jets that try to basically pull off a quick one, they will be shot down. So if in case, as you say, if there is an escalation, what do you think Venezuela is going to do?
Yeah, this is where it starts getting dicey in terms of both predictions as well as the ability to see something really ramping up. Venezuelan jets have been flying close to U.S. Navy boats, and the Navy is done with this at this point. They're saying they will shoot them down. I mean, it will ultimately be up to Maduro in terms of if those jets start posing more of a threat and do get shot down, Venezuela will have to respond. It's going to be up to Maduro in terms of how strong the response is. You may be able to see some form of de-escalation after that. Maduro recognizes that if he starts bombing or really messing around with U.S. military personnel in the region, this is going to end badly for him. I don't think you're going to see a all-out attack or anything, if that's what you're getting at. I may be wrong on this, but I mean, that is essentially the end of the regime if he does this. That will give a clear precedent that, okay, significant action is needed here. And he can see how Trump has acted in such cases. Again, I point to the Iran situation, as well as in Syria, after chemical weapons were used. He bombed quite extensively Assad's forces, not once, but twice, after those red lines were crossed. So I don't think Trump is going to take that lightly, and I think Maduro is smart enough to recognize that before he does anything too dramatic.
Well, Kyle, I agree that tensions are not going to go away for at least a few months. And if there is a spike in escalation and things do get hot going on forward, I will definitely have to call you back, and we will need more of your insights. And to all our viewers, if you want to read Kyle's work, it's linked in the description below. Thank you very much, Kyle, for giving your time and joining us at Fair Observer.
Thank you for having me.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.